Sunday, March 27, 1881. The New York Times. Where stenches abound. A still hunt by the State Board of Health, scouring the shores of the East River in a tugboat. Mysteries of oil refining revealed. What the fertilizing factories can do in the way of smells. Some of the sickening stenches which sweep over Murray Hill and its neighborhood were traced to their origin by a committee of the State Board of Health yesterday. The homes of these smells are along the shores of the East River, and by dodging in and out of slips with a tugboat, and by creeping and climbing over oil lighters and rotten string pieces, they were finally reached by the committeemen without loss of life or limb. The visit to the bone-rendering, oil refining, and fertilizing establishments was understood to have been secretly arranged, and was intended to have been secretly carried out. But somehow or other, nobody around these various places appeared to be surprised at the descent of the very respectable-looking body of committee men and reporters. The members of the committee were Dr. J. Savage Delavan, chairman, Dr. Alicia Harris, secretary, and Assemblyman Erastus Brooks. Accompanying them were Professor Nason of the Troy Polytechnic, Professor Charles R. Wingate, and Mr. J. Crowell of the Standard Oil Company, whose interest in the trip ceased once the committee had inspected the works of that company at Hunter's Point. The party, together with a hamper of provisions and some long-necked bottles in straw wrappers, was comfortably stowed away in the tugboat Brilliant, which was moored at the foot of East 33rd Street. The committee first visited Rafferty and Williams' fat rendering factory, which occupies the riverfront between 43rd and 44th Streets and extends back to First Avenue. Passing through a number of sheds on the way to the office, Dr. Harris stopped to examine a pile of strongly smelling stuff heaped up to the very rafters. "What is that, Doctor?" inquired Mr. Brooks. "It looks like guano, smells like it. I guess 'tis it," replied the doctor, dropping the handful and uttering an expressive "Peuh." Mr. Williams conducted the hunters through the establishment. Large barrels of tallow stood on every side, ready to be turned into stearine and oil. This tallow is first thrown into the bashing machine and chopped to bits. Thence it goes into the trying machine, and by means of revolving blades is passed and repassed over an iron surface whose temperature is 250 degrees. From the liquid thus obtained is extracted the stearine, which is packed in hard, dry cakes in barrels and forwarded east and west to be used in the adulteration of lard. The oil which is left is sent chiefly to Holland, where the honest Dutch farmers mix it with their butter, producing a cheaper grade of so-called butter, which is declared to be good enough for the mill operatives of England. "You will observe," said Mr. Williams, "that the process of rendering fresh tallow produces no smell." The committee leaned over the edge of the trying machine and satisfied themselves that, while a smell existed, it was by no means disagreeable. In another apartment were vats of blood, whose albumen was being collected for the clarifying of sugar. passing into still another apartment, the committee were introduced to a number of large cylinders, looking somewhat like huge wooden guns. They were charged with the blood and offal of bullocks, which was then subjected to a drying process that reduced the mass to something resembling fine black dirt. This was the stuff that Dr. Harris confounded with guano. Its capacity for stink is apparently unlimited. Under the same roof, it is mixed with phosphates, forming an excellent fertilizer. An ox may be killed in the morning. The next night you will find him here in this heap of fertilizing matter, explained Mr. Williams. This whole district between 42nd and 47th Streets is given up almost entirely to slaughterhouses and rendering establishments, and is quite as prolific of smells as any locality on the Long Island shore. The premises occupied by Rafferty and Williams are said to be unusually well sewered, and they were in a remarkably cleanly condition when the committee made their appearance. Steaming over to Hunter's Point, the party disembarked at the works of the Standard Oil Refining Company. There are 24 stills here, each having a capacity of about 600 barrels. Into these, the petroleum is pumped from the pipe which runs along the bed of the East River, and so connects the works with the Hudson River Railroad on Manhattan Island. Beneath each still was a glowing bed of coals, whose heat reduced the oil to steam, the first step taken in refining the Pennsylvania petroleum. Formerly, it was explained to the committee, certain noxious gases were given out by this process, which escaped from the tops of the stills as nauseating stenches, which poisoned the atmosphere for miles around. Now, Mr. Crowell and Professor Nason explained, these gases are collected and turned into the furnaces where they are consumed. They are also valuable here as a means of intensifying the heat. The vicinity of the stills formerly was the district portion of the premises, but with the aid of improved appliances, it is now quite cleanly. Scarcely a trace of smoke was visible at the tops of the chimneys, notwithstanding the number of furnaces in full glow beneath. The representatives of the company said that their premises were so perfectly sewered that all the drippings of oil and water collected into a single trap. Here the oil rose to the surface, was bailed out, and again was put through the refining process. The water flowed the whole length of this trap, and finally emptied into the river in a milk-white cascade. Complaint has been made that this water is the source of much stench. The committee took a smell and remarked that it was quite offensive. In a shed nearby was an open tank containing 2,000 barrels of kerosene, a very pretty liquid in such a quantity with its reddish-blue shades. At the dock was a boat loading with naphtha, which was fed into its iron tanks with pipes. At the same point, the terrible sludge acid, the refuse of petroleum after everything valuable has been extracted from it, is loaded in a similar manner and ferried away for use in the fertilizing factories. Maybe it wasn't a good day for smells. At all events, the committee found here nothing more objectionable than exists around the gas houses on the east and west sides of this city. The odor of kerosene, however, was mixed with a strong smell from a fertilizing factory hard by. The Standard folks, therefore, declined to be held responsible for the whole of the stench which is wafted from this particular point to Murray Hill, during a strong easterly storm. Across a creek from the Standard Works are Bostwick's Empire Oil Works. Here, too, everything was found in apple pie order. The process of refining is the same as that employed on the Standard docks. The method of disposing of the gases originating in the process of condensation is different. A tall circular tower called an agitator is used, and by means of this and the additional agencies of sulfuric acid and tin scraps, the gases are, the superintendent explained, almost wholly destroyed. The water of the creek was discolored with oil, which had escaped from both these refining works. To Pratt's Astral Oil Works in Williamsburg, the smelling committee next made its way. 2 representatives of the Brooklyn Board of Health, Health Commissioner Crane and Sanitary Superintendent Raymond, stood proudly on the string piece here, ready to show the superiority which Brooklyn establishments have over those of some other sections of Long Island. Another agitator, more stills, 20 in all, each containing 600 barrels, and an odor of kerosene permeating the whole place, as in each of the other 2 refineries, were here found. It was said here that the noxious gases given off in condensing the petroleum were utilized as fuel to such an extent that from 1/2 to a whole ton of coal was saved to each furnace. The first object to attract the eye on the dock was a printed notice of the statute in regard to handling oils with, quote, very important, standing out from the body of the type in large red letters. Health Commissioner Crane remarked that this company had adopted all the known appliances and their place was as little of a nuisance as it was possible to make. The waters of Newtown Creek run through a region that gives out more disgusting smell to the square inch than any other portion of the known world can furnish in the square mile. The creek runs far back into Long Island and is wholly under tide water influence. It is navigable for quite a distance, and this is said to be the only reason that no effort has ever been made to fill it up. The black water is so charged with oil and the refuse of the many factories on the banks that it has almost the consistency of tar at all tides and all seasons of the year. The first stench encountered arose from the dumps, the name of a collection of canal boats which are here to be found the year round, discharging cargoes of manure which go to fertilize the so-called Long Island farms. Sun and Fleming's oil refining factory was higher up the creek, and this too was visited. The only difference between it and the others already inspected was in its vast extent. 48 iron tanks, some of them of a capacity of 86,000 barrels, are here erected. I suppose, said Mr. Brooks to one of the employees, you, the Standard, and the others are all one concern. Well, was his reply, we act in concert somewhat. These works are part and parcel of the gigantic Standard Company. After leaving these works, the home of the most powerful stench of the day was discovered. It was in a little factory used for restoring sludge acid. It belongs to a Mr. Clark, who is a member of the firm controlling the fertilizer factory at Barren Island. Sludge acid is a black liquid of the consistency of molasses. Mr. Clark forces steam through it, which, he asserts, carries off its disgusting gases and in a measure makes it odorless. It is then mixed with ground bones and menhaden, and the whole is used as a fertilizer. While disagreeable enough of itself, sludge acid, when mixed with water, gives out a most abominable stench. Assemblyman Brooks started as if a knife had pierced him after taking one whiff. The other members of the party were visibly affected. Health Commissioner Crane, however, said there was an aromatic odor about it, which to him was particularly pleasing. The statement startled his hearers. Dr. Harris sat warily down on the tugboat deck and declared emphatically that it was one of those diabolical smells which no amount of profanity could relieve. Decaying bones and the refuse of Coe's fertilizing works contributed to hurry the party out of the locality and across the creek to the Queens County shore. The other fertilizing establishments along here use sulfuric acid, having abandoned sludge acid, and the living smells with which they are permeated are far more tolerable. Reed and Company's and Preston's are the principal fertilizing factories on this side of the creek. Mr. Preston admitted that bone boiling in the open air was offensive and agreed to place covers over his cauldrons. The basis of the fertilizers here manufactured is what is called Charleston rock, a deposit found in the beds of the Ashley and Cooper rivers near Charleston, South Carolina, which contains the bones of marine animals and is highly charged with phosphorus. At the Queens County Oil Works is turned out paraffin oil and wax, the latter being used for the chewing gum which is supplied to Vassar and other female seminaries. These works contribute only a small quota of the stinks abounding in this locality. The Standard Ammonia Works throws off a peculiar smell, which finds its way into New York. The last place visited by the committee was the Greenpoint Cream of Tartar Works. Complaint has been made of them, but it is said improved appliances have recently been introduced which have largely modified the disagreeable odors.